Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Rigo Villa, Community Manager on the Cisco Learning Network, and I'll be your host for this webinar. In today's session, we will be covering ISE 3.1, APIs, Ansible, and Automation with our speaker and presenter, Thomas Howard. But before we get started, I wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, I do want to let our attendees know that our presenter is currently working from home. So if we do run into any technical issues during the webinar, we'll do our very best to resolve it as soon as possible. So we just want to thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. Next, if you have any questions during the session, we ask that you please post them in the question and answer panel, the Q&A panel, as that will help our panelists keep track of all of your questions and would also allow them to provide you with a much more timely response. Also, if you experience any audio streaming issues during the live presentation, I do recommend using the call-in telephone number that I'm going to be posting in the chat window here in just a moment. And at the end of this webinar, you're going to get a pop-up survey with a couple of questions about today's presentation. And we would really appreciate it if you can just take a moment to fill it out and share with us any thoughts or feedback that you may have about this webinar today. I also want to let our attendees know that this session will be recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing within about 5 business days after today. And I'll be sure to post some more information about that in the chat window a little bit later on. And last but not least, we're also going to be launching a couple of poll questions throughout this presentation. And when we are ready to launch one of these polls, we're going to go ahead and announce it live. And then you're going to see the official poll pop up on your webinar event screen. And then that's when you're going to have an opportunity to submit your answers. So we look forward to your participation on those. And without any further delay, I am now going to hand it over to our presenter to kick off the presentation for today. So Thomas, if you're ready, please take it away.
Thank you, Rigo. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to ISE APIs, Ansible, and Automation. So I'm happy to give you a tour of all these things today and everything we're doing in ISE 3.1. So the first thing I want to know is, has anybody used OpenAPIs before, and what have you used it with? Another product? Have you even tried it with, well, I guess not ISE yet because it's not released. But what other products have you tried OpenAPIs with? I'd love to hear your response. So go ahead and type it in the poll area that Rigo just posted for you, and we'll come back and see what the answers are here in a bit. So also a reminder, if you do have any questions about things as I'm going through the demos and the slides, you do have the ability to ask questions to our Q&A panelists. They're ready and waiting for your questions. We covered ISE and AWS last month. So Hosuk Wan went through our probably the biggest feature we have coming in ISE 3.1, which is the ability to deploy ISE natively in AWS. So if you want to know more about that capability, check out our recorded ISE videos on the YouTube channel or on the ISE webinars, as Rigo said. You can get the full details and see how that works if you're interested in doing that when ISE 3.1 is released in early August. So we're talking about these things because we want to be able to allow you to deploy ISE in the public cloud. So we started doing that in ISE 3.0 by letting you deploy it in VMware Cloud, in AWS, and we followed up with that on Azure. But now we want to be able to allow you to do it natively. So that's what Hosuk covered. But know that if you aren't using AWS, you're using one of the other public cloud providers, we're going to be providing support for that in short order, starting with Azure later this year and some of the other cloud providers. So if you're also wanting to know what additional things besides AWS and the open APIs and Ansible things that I'm talking about today that we're doing in ISE 3.1, tune in to next month's webinar when Hosuk is going to come back and he's going to be talking about all the other features that we've put into ISE 3.1. So with that, here's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be going over open APIs, showing you how to use them with Postman, talk about some Python modules that we've developed and how those are used with Ansible so that you can do basically automation of your ISE deployment, do operational updates, and create these different playbooks to allow you to control your ISE configuration. And I want you to be able to do this when we leave here today. So there's also a Cisco DevNet Sandbox that you're going to be able to try it out with, and I'll give you details on that a little bit later. But first, Rigo, what did people say about open APIs?
Thank you, Thomas. So let me see. So for our results, so the open question was, I have open APIs with, and from the list, I see a lot of interesting answers. We have CDO/FDM.
Okay.
We have Cisco DNA Center and ISE.
Mm-hmm.
We have a few folks who are saying that they have not had an opportunity to use it.
Yeah.
Uh, we have another one for DNA Center.
Uh-huh.
We have Meraki DNA Center APIs
Okay.
and FMC, DCNM, and I also see SecureX here on the list as well.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. So a lot of those security products that Cisco has are starting to adopt open APIs as well as Meraki. So we're finally joining that bandwagon. We've done REST APIs for years, but now they're going to be done in the open API format. So we'll talk about what that is right now. Thanks, Rico. So ISE and open APIs. A couple of months ago, I did an ISE webinar on REST APIs. So if you're not familiar with what REST APIs are, you're going to want to go back and watch that video also. But basically, the idea is you're able to do create, read, update, and delete operations through HTTPS on these different resources to control the configuration and operation of ISE. We've been doing this for years, as I said. We've had the ERS APIs, the MNT APIs, and even PX Grid APIs. And now we're doing open APIs in ISE 3.1 to add some configuration. The reason open APIs are interesting is because it's a way that a lot of different companies are finally coming together with a common format or a standardized way of describing their APIs. And this may not seem like a big deal, but it's very much kind of like, HTML, and that you finally have a standardized document format and standardized way of talking about different elements of a document. Now we have a standardized way about describing different elements of an API, and that's what open APIs do for us. And so originally it started out way back in 2011 as something called Swagger, and over time they evolved it and they actually donated it to the public, and they called it Open API, and that happened with OpenAPI 3.0. We're now actually out at OpenAPI 3.1. That just happened earlier this year. And if you look at the ISE timeline of all the different things we've done, so we started way back over 10 years ago doing REST APIs with the monitoring troubleshooting APIs. Then we added the ERS ones for doing configuration. And finally, we've started implementing all of our new APIs in this open API format. So we've been doing REST for a long time, but now we're doing it in the open API format because it took a while for that to be standardized and broadly adopted. So when I talk about this format, here's really what we're dealing with. So it's a document that can be done in either YAML or JSON format. This one happens to be done YAML. And really what we're talking about is, you're doing versioning, you're doing a base URL. So where does somebody go to find this object or this resource on your server? What's the path to get there? What's the URL, right? Then what kind of security do you have implemented? Is it basic auth or a token or something like that? And then what is the actual path to get to this specific resource? And once I'm there, what are the different operations that I can do on a get, post, delete, put, even a patch, things like that? And then if I do those, what are the responses that I get out of it? So that's all Open API is. It's just a specification for how you can write your APIs so that everybody can standardize on that format and make better use of it. And I'll show you why that's really important here in a bit. So what we've done specifically in ISE 3.1 is we've implemented some new APIs for these capabilities. So backup and restore, certificates, the policy API, which is probably the one that people have been waiting, I would say 10 years for. Ever since I started in 1.0, people have been wanting the ability to import and export policy, and you finally have that now in 3.1. Repository API, so adding and removing repositories. If you kick off a backup to a repository, you have a task service because it's a long-running process, so you can monitor that. And we've added a convenience TrustSec API as well to go with the policies. We already implemented TrustSec years ago in ERS, but now you have the ability basically to do read or get operations with the TrustSec API with open APIs. So I will mention in 3.1 patch 1, there's a few more things coming that we're not quite there yet to do, full operation and control of your ISE deployment. So these are kind of all the different things that we think are necessary in order to have complete lifecycle orchestration and policy management in ISE. So there's a few things still missing. These are going to be coming after we release patch 1. So as I said, ISE 3.1 is going to be released in early August. And so give it a few months and we should have 3.1 patch 1 out. And you'll get these additional APIs to do patch installation, automate your deployment, which is where you're able to control your different nodes and assign the different personas, and the ability to do licensing. Otherwise, we have these other capabilities in ISE 3.1. So with that, let's go do a quick demo of OpenAPIs and show you what that looks like. All right, so I've got ISE running here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my settings and turn on my APIs. So if you haven't seen it before, this is our new, this is ISE 3.0, or this is 3.1, but in 3.0, we kind of changed the GUI a little bit. We have this APIs settings with this extra tab now for ERS and OpenAPIs. So we want to turn those on. And we have an application gateway as well, which I'll show you over here. And the great thing about the application gateway is it's actually going to be able to redirect things that were formerly on port 9060. You can actually go ahead and open them on port 443 now. So that's a really nice convenience. You don't have to remember first of all, port 9060, but you can just go to the URL. You don't have to worry about that, and it makes it really simple. So what we're going to do is, before we were able to open up the ERS SDK straight from here, and now we have the ability to do the OpenAPI ones as well. And this is what it looks like. So what we're doing is we've taken the Swagger utility for displaying OpenAPIs. And if you look over here, these are the different OpenAPIs I was telling you about. And so if we choose different ones, we can go ahead and browse through and see all of the different resources or objects that we can now control. And so if we talk about something like a policy set, I want to get a policy set, or all of my policy sets. You can just do a get, which is basically the same as a read, and we're going to try it out, and we want to execute it. And this is a really simple one. And so you can see down here in the request body, this is a pretty vanilla unconfigured ISE box. And so you can see that it's the default policy set. And of course, if we have more policy sets, you would see a list of all the different policy sets configured. But this is a great example of how you can get started. And I just want to show you how you're able to then take this, and if we want to go find out our authorization rules, let's go back up and let's go look for our authorization rules. And if we want to get all of our authorization rules, you'll notice that we have to supply a policy ID because you have different policy IDs for different policy sets. And so let's try it out. And now that I've done that, I can enter my policy ID that I copied from the policy set. And if I execute it, you can see I've got all of my default ISE authorization rules, right? So I have one for wireless access. I have one for profiled IP phones, right? I just go on down the list. So this is exactly, non-Cisco IP phones, just like what you would see in a default ISE configuration. So I'm now looking at those via API, and I'm doing it all directly in ISE through this web interface using OpenAPI. So it's a really, really cool thing. You can actually interact with it right here. You don't need to use Postman. You don't need to use curl. You don't need to use Python. You can just do it right from here if you just want to see what it looks like and play with it. So that's a really nice thing. So that's basically what the OpenAPI capability is built in. Obviously, you want to be able to use these, and we're going to go through and do some more of that. One thing I'll just do real quick is, I got to change it up here. if we wanted to, I think I was on this box earlier, so I already have repositories defined. Let me just see if I have it. I might just kick off a backup. Yeah. Can you hear me now, Rigo?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yeah, thank you.
How long was I muted for?
I would say just about less than 10 seconds,
Okay.
5 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened.
No worries.
So what I was saying is we got a list of repositories. I was playing with this one earlier. And so what I want to do is I want to kick off a backup process. And so I'm going to get that name from that repository. And I want to go to my backup restore. And if I go in here, I can kick off a backup process right from here. And so I need to supply my repository name, which is why I got that. And I need to put in my encryption key, and I'll just say backup name, that's fine. And we're going to go ahead and execute that. And let's see what it says. All right, so down here in the response, it says we have a response, and notice it has an ID as well. And we can use this ID to pull the task API to know when our backup job has been completed. So you can see that it's telling us, go ahead and use the task service to get the status of the backup job. So for that, let's go use the task service. So tasks, let's get the task status. Let's try it out, execute it, and here's a list of them. It looks like I did it earlier. This one completed with success. And now I have this new one that's in progress. And if I was only interested in mine, what I could do is come back up here and do a get with a specific task ID. Here's my task ID. I'll paste it in. Oops. Oh, I didn't copy it. Dang it. I guess I can get it from here. That's much faster. This one's in progress. This usually takes about 10 minutes to do this backup. So I'll do this one. Try it out, task ID, there we go. Execute it. And now you see it provides just the status for that specific task that's going on in the background. So that's using OpenAPIs. Now what I want to do is let's flip back over and let's talk more about why that's important. First of all, is it helps with standardized documentation. So what we're going to be doing, hopefully this week, you're going to see our documentation on DevNet be refreshed. So our doc team has been working on refreshing the existing ISE APIs to this new format, which is much, much cleaner, very nice tables with all the different attributes and descriptions. They've done a really nice job on that. So hopefully you're going to see that updating this week. Then you'll be able to hopefully make good use of that. The other reason it's useful to have open APIs is because it allows interoperability to share and do things with these APIs in different tools like Postman. So let's take a look at Postman. Rigo, we got another poll. What have people used Postman with? Have you guys used it with other products, other APIs, other Cisco products? Have you even done it with ISE? I showed you how to do this a couple months ago in the REST API webinar. Have you been busy working with it? I'd love to hear. So if you don't have Postman, it's basically an application that you can run on all the platforms. It even has a web-based application. And the way that it's running in the DevNet Sandbox that I'm going to show you, you must use the agent. You must download it to your computer and run it. You can't use the browser-based agent. You'll have cross-origin resource scripting problems, and they have filters, they have firewalls, so that you're not going to be able to share your content with the Postman web service. So you have to use a local agent on your computer if you do it. And if you want to get the existing Postman collections that I've built, they're posted in GitHub. This is something that I told you about in the ISE REST API webinar. So go ahead and go out there and you can get those and you can start to play with them. So I'm going to show you how we can do that. Let me make sure there we go. Let's get over to PowerPoint. So this is Postman. Hey, Rigo, do we have some answers yet on how people are using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. So for the results, the top choice based on what I see here is Cisco products. Next, we have those who have used Postman with all of the above. And then we also have a good number of folks who have not used it with anything.
All right. Well, that's why you're here today. I'm going to show you how to do it. So that's great. I'm glad you guys are using it, and it's a great way to explore APIs. That's why I'm featuring it, because I want you to see, if you want to get started, you want to play with something. Now that we have the open APIs in ISE, that's an easier option, but you still can't do it for the existing ERS APIs. So let's show you how that works. So when you come in here, first thing you want to do is probably create a new workspace. And I'm just going to say this is my ISE APIs. And there's this visibility option on here. If I just do personal for everything, I'm not trying to share everything out with my team. If I do, I post it in GitHub, so I am sharing it out that way. This is meant more for development teams when you're developing APIs. So I'm going to create that workspace. Then you come up here to import, and I've already got a folder going with all these open APIs downloaded. So one thing I forgot to show you is, there we go. I'm going to import this. So I've got all these different open API files in here. I'm going to open those up, and it's going to start importing them. So here are the different APIs I was just showing you. And I also added in the ERS collection, Postman collection. So let's import those. While that's going on, I want to show you what you can do if you want to get these open API definitions. You can actually choose one of these APIs here, and this link, if you click on it, will actually give you the open API specification for that API. So you can see this is the JSON format, and you can see it's the ISE API for backup restore. It's built with OpenAPI spec version 3.0, and this is version 1.0 of this particular API. So that's basically, I exported all of these. I didn't want you to have to watch me do that, 6 or 7 times. So rather than doing that, I did it ahead of time, and I just imported an entire folder of them, and there they are. So we have our collections up here, and one that it didn't do was a file for my ERS APIs. I want to get those. We're going to want those. Let's do that one. All right. So we were doing the backup and restore earlier, checking in on our task, our backup task. Let's go ahead and do that. So whenever you import an API, the first thing you have to do is you have to do a little bit of configuration to make sure that it can talk to your particular ISE node or your server, whatever happens to be ISE or any other thing. So in this case, what we're going to do is we need to customize how this particular API talks. And you can see that by default, they chose no auth. I don't know why they do that, since ISE requires basic auth. So we got to first of all choose basic auth. And then we need to choose a username and a password so that we can authenticate via REST into ISE. And so for that, I'm going to go ahead and choose a username. I'm going to use a variable. We're going to be using environments for this, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a bit. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do a password here. And notice that it's telling me that, hey, it's an unresolved variable. We don't have anything for that yet. I'm going to fix that. But since I'm here in this screen, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to save this. There's a little save icon up here. Make sure you save it, otherwise it won't actually use it. And then the other thing you need to do is, we don't have any environments. We created a new workspace, but there's no environments. If you're not familiar with environments, those are basically a way of holding your secrets, or caching variables and their values for particular environments. So think about production versus staging or lab. Think about different kinds of sets of tokens and keys that you would need to keep for different deployments. So that's what we're going to be using this for. So we have no environment, so there will be no substitution of any variables here. So what we need to do is come in and we need to add an environment. And I happen to be in dcloud on this because I was having trouble with my VPN earlier in the DevNet Sandbox. So I'm just going to go ahead and use dcloud. So that's the environment I'm in. I'm going to specify my REST username, and I need to take out the curly brackets, and I need to specify my password. So what I'm doing is I'm basically defining my variables. I'm going to give them a value next. So for this and for this, I'm going to use my standard ISE super user account. And again, I need to save this, otherwise it's not going to work. So now that I've got my environment set up, okay, so it says still no environment. So I have to choose this new dcloud environment that I've defined. Now that I've chosen dcloud, there's my values, okay? That will allow me to now authenticate. So let me close this environment tab. And now check this out. There it is. So now it sees those environment variables, and so it's going to substitute them for the username and password when we go to authenticate with our Task API service. This may seem like a lot of work, but this is something you basically have to do on every single API. If I go to the repository one, because we just imported it, you got to do the same setup all over again over here, okay? So I'm showing this because I don't want you to get frustrated and stuck. So remember that you've got to go in and set the authentication parameters and create an environment for yourself. So now that we've done that, what we can do is we can go get our task status, send that over, and there it is. So it looks like both have now completed with success. Okay, so that's how we were able to import our OpenAPI specification and use them inside of Postman. So let's see what else we can do. If we wanted to look at our policy the same way, we would need to go in and specify basic auth, set up our variables, and I want to show the password so I can make sure I'm typing in all the curly brackets correctly, and password. Okay, now that I've got that set up, I got to save it, otherwise I won't use it. And now I can go in and look at my network access policy, and I can do my policy set. And if I want to do a get on that, send it, and there it is. There's my default policy set again. So you can see how I'm doing the exact same thing I was doing with the OpenAPIs, but now I'm in Postman. I actually think it's a little easier to navigate through this. So that's why I like using this tool. And if you want to do it with ERS, we have these things available over here as well. So if I wanted to do something like a network device, all of these other configuration objects are in ISE. And so if I send that, so I believe I've defaulted this one to use the REST username and REST password already. So it's coming up. I don't have any network devices, but I've created a basic one here. I've already got a body in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and submit this just so we have one. And so it created it. And now if I go look at it, one thing you'll notice about this collection is that I use test scripts to populate the ID. Remember the ID I was having to manually copy for our task ID and for our repository? I had to copy the name or the ID. I'm doing this automatically with a little bit of a JavaScript here. And so this is one of the other conveniences you can get with Postman when you build the collections. You can automate some of that stuff that's a little bit tedious, where you got to do all the copies and pastes and things. So now I've already copied. Check this out. I already used my JavaScript to copy the ID. I didn't have to do anything. And now if I want to go, if I want to, what do I want to do? I want to get information on that particular network device. Here's all the gory detail about that network device that I just configured, okay? So that's how you can use the collections to quickly get the information you want. So now let's flip back over and let's talk about Python. So one of the things we did in ISE 3.1, or actually it wasn't ISE 3.1, it was for all versions of ISE, all the different objects in REST, we implemented a Python SDK. We happened to do it at the time we were developing ISE 3.1 because we also wanted to do Ansible. So what we have here is the Cisco ISE SDK. If you actually, if you know Python, you know about PyPI and doing an installation with pip. So you can do all that. It's just, pip install Cisco ISE SDK, and it's open source. We have the packages out in GitHub, and you can see if you're interested in how that works. I'm here to show you. So it's a really, really simple API. The thing I like about it is, you basically do one setup call to define your REST access with the username and password, just like we did in Postman. And you specify that base URL, just like we talked about with OpenAPIs. And then you have an option to set this flag for false to say, I'm in my lab. I don't have a full certificate. It's self-signed. So I know security is going to fail. So I'm just going to not verify my certificate. But then other than that, all you have to do is then just do a bunch of get calls. So pick a resource like a repository and get it and dump the output, and it'll dump it as JSON, and you can very quickly see what it is. So this is basically the Python SDK and how that works. I'm not going to go into great detail and show you this because I really want to get on and show you the good stuff with Ansible. But know that Ansible relies on all of these objects in the Cisco ISE SDK, and we'll talk about that next. So YAML, I'm bringing this up because this is sort of one of the major new formats for doing configurations, declarative configurations. So YAML ain't markup language, so it's not quite markup. In fact, it's really nice because it's so simple. What we're trying to do here is basically we talk about taking a configuration and breaking it down into its constituent elements. You have these things that are basic scalar objects, things like numbers and strings and things, and then we also have compound objects, which are lists of things or key value pairs, or even an object, which can kind of be all the above strung together. And for the object there, you see that's written in JSON. And it takes a little bit of getting used to, but then you kind of get used to it, dealing with all the curlies and the quotes and everything. But what's interesting is YAML has come along, and I think you can see by looking at it how much simpler it is to read. It's much, much more human readable. You don't have the curlies and the quotes, a lot less verbose. And the other thing that really makes YAML amazing is comments. Stupid and simple, but man, what a difference that makes when you're trying to, program something, or you're trying to make a configuration of something and you want to educate people on why you're doing what you're doing, or trying to remind yourself of why you did what you did. Comments are super helpful, and that's something that you can't do in JSON. There's all kinds of crazy hacks people have tried to come up with, but the ability to have comments is really important. So YAML gives you that option, and it's just easier to read, much more compact. So that's what we use when we do Ansible configurations. So Ansible, before we go there, how many of you have done Ansible, or is this totally new? Have you done it with never before? Have you tried it with Linux? Maybe you've done it with some other Cisco apps and devices, just like you've done the Python libraries. Love to hear what you've done. So Ansible is basically a really simple, agentless way of doing scalable configurations of different kinds of computers or applications. So what makes it nice is, first of all, when you do configurations, you don't have to read XML, you don't have to read JSON, you're just reading YAML. It's very, very simple, easy to read, even for a non-programmer. Then you have the ability to now configure applications, services, workstations, whether it's Linux, Windows, even ISE, right? Other security applications. And what really makes it cool is it's agentless. So you don't have to install anything. It'll just work if you have SSH or REST APIs, or in the case of Windows, you use WinRM to be able to connect in and do the management. So that's why it was so important for us to build the cisco.ise SDK so that we could utilize REST resources because Ansible runs on basically Python modules. We needed to be able to do that. So Rigo, what do people say for what they've used Ansible for or not?
Yeah, so let's see. So the top answer here reveals that a significant amount of participants have not had an opportunity to configure using Ansible.
Okay.
But we do have a couple of folks who said they've used it to configure Cisco devices. And then I also see using it for Linux as well.
Perfect. Okay. That's what I expected. That's why we're here, right? So you guys are in the right spot today. So what we're going to do is show you guys how to use this. The reason this is important is because you've probably been hearing about infrastructure as code. So we're trying to move applications and services to infrastructure as code, putting it in the cloud, making it more automated, being able to pave and repave infrastructure in the data center. That's where this is all going, and people are starting to do that even with their network infrastructure, whether it's virtual networking devices or even just automating the configuration and the updates so they don't make mistakes as much, or it just goes a lot faster. So that's where we're trying to go with this. So the way this works is this is you and your trusty computer, and you want to manage some nodes, whether it's ISE or Linux or some containers or services or applications somewhere in a cloud or even Windows boxes. But you want to basically maintain the configuration out there. And that's what you use Ansible to do. So what happens is you are basically considered the control node if you're running the Ansible application from your computer, or you can have a separate instance for more scalability. And if you've got a team of people working together, you can all work on what's called the Ansible Tower. So the way this works is you need to have an inventory of your different hosts that you're going to be controlling. With ISE, it's pretty simple. You really, because we have the policy administration node, it takes care of the replication of the configurations for everything internally, beyond. After you do the personas, it's all taken care of by the PAN. So you don't have to worry about it. So really, we just have like one node that we need to worry about configuring, unless you have, a lab instance and your production instance and maybe some other ones. So the way Ansible works is they have a website called Galaxy, and this is where they keep what are called collections. Collections are basically collections of modules that we built. This is why we did the cisco.ise SDK and the cisco.ise modules and collections for Ansible. They're just a collection of these modules, and basically a module is a Python script that runs SSH or REST API calls or WinRM and talks to those devices to control a very specific part of its configuration or services or operation. And the way we do that is with something called playbooks. A playbook is a YAML file that we script out into different plays, and each play has a very specific ordered series of tasks. And in each of those, basically, you make a call to configure something. I want to make a backup. I want to configure a repository. I want to create a network device. Each of these things can be considered a task. And if you have 1,000 network devices, you can build 1,000 tasks to go configure them all. So that's basically what's happening. We're not going to get into more advanced stuff today, but basically Ansible also has this concept of roles. So that if you're trying to configure certain Windows servers as database servers and other ones as web applications, or certain Windows machines as Active Directory servers and others as workstations, you can do that, and it's all very standardized. Like I said, we're not going to go into that today because ISE is pretty simple. We don't need a lot of that. So Ansible collections, just to give you an idea of all the different collections that are out there, right? There's a lot of them. If you go on the website today, you won't actually see cisco.ise mentioned as one of these official Ansible collections. That's because there's like a voting community approval process. We're still going through that, but know that you can download cisco.ise from Galaxy today, and that's what we're going to do. So as I said, these are the sort of the taxonomy of how things are done with roles and playbooks. So basically what you're doing is we have a play that we give a name. We may have some variables like credentials because we need to be able to do a REST call. We need to have a username and a password or maybe a token or something. And we probably want to put that in a separate file that we can encrypt. That way we don't have our secrets exposed unintentionally, especially if we check it into a repository, especially in like a GitHub or something. And then you have a task, which also has a name. And then you see us referencing the module. So if we wanted to create a network device, in this case, it would be like a Meraki MR46, you can see we're going to talk to this specific ISE host with this username, with this password. We're going to have that true or false, verify the certificate, and we're going to see that that configuration is present, and there's some more stuff in there. And we'll go through what that looks like. So one of the reasons Ansible is so important is because of this concept of idempotence. The idea is if you've got all these different boxes on your network, right, Windows and Linux and ISE and other things, they can be in a various state of configuration, update, upgrade, unpatched, whatever they are. And so what's nice about Ansible is you will declare in YAML in your playbook what you want the final outcome to be, and then it will run. And if there's no change, no problem. If there's a little bit of a change, no problem. If there's a lot of change, no problem. It will work through everything and get it so that everything is consistent with that playbook. And then maybe you've got a whole brand new device you have to provision from scratch. You can do that, but at the end of it, they will all be the same. So that is basically the power of idempotence. So these are the commands that we are going to go run in our environment. When you do the sandbox, this is how you're going to get your environment set up. Or if you want to play in your own lab with your own ISE installation, this is what you'll want to do as well. So what we'll do is let's flip over, and I am going to copy some of these, and then we'll go run them on my server here. All right. So if you haven't seen this before, this is Visual Studio Code by Microsoft. It's free. I highly recommend it. It works really, really well. What we have is in this environment over here, I have my terminal, which you're probably familiar with. I've already downloaded my GitHub repository with my different Ansible plays. You're going to get a copy of this. Everybody will be able to download this and do this exact thing or run it in the DevNet sandbox. So to get set up, what we would do is go ahead and we would want to install all this code. I've already done this, but I'm just showing you what it looks like. Looks like I've installing a new one. Oh, I'm installing this local directory, that's why. So we're doing what's called a virtual environment. That's what the pip-env command is. The reason for doing this is because if you play with different software packages, different versions of Python, different packages that do different things, it's always a good idea to create a virtual environment because after a while you just get so much cruft and stuff on your computer, it can be really hard to manage. So it's a good idea to keep different virtual environments up and running for these different projects you're working on, right? Or your Ansible environment, because it may take a different version, it may require a different version of Python or require different versions of packages in order to be successful. This one is taking a while. I already installed it on here, so I might just cancel this if it doesn't finish up here real quick. All right, let me go exit. I'm gonna get back into my terminal. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Am I in my, I think I'm in. Okay, let's do Python version. Let's make sure. No, we're not. Okay, so let me go into my shell for pip. Excellent. Okay, and now I'm going to source. I don't like my prompt, and there's some environment variables I want to set so we don't get errors about or warnings about certificates. So I'm going to source this source me file. I got to go into ISE APIs. There we go, and source me. All right, there we go. Now I have a nice prompt. So what we're going to do is we want to install Ansible. So the commands we said we were going to do, let's make sure that cisco.ise SDK is installed. It's having a hard time copying. Okay, so that one goes pretty quick. Ansible takes a lot longer, so I'm not going to do that one. It takes about 2 minutes. So I just want to show you that it's there, and I can run Ansible Playbook, and I can check the version. So it's there. We have 2.11. That's great. So now what we want to do is I've got some different playbooks over here that I want to run through with you all to show you what these things look like. So this is our first introductory YAML config, basically hello world. So what I want to do is I want to run an Ansible playbook, and it looks like this. I specify Ansible playbook, and typically you have to supply an inventory file. This is very simple. I don't need to do it. It'll give me a warning about using the localhost, whatever, I don't care. So we're going to run it out of that folder, and it's the 1.0. And so when we run this, what you'll notice is it didn't care about my comment, but it ran a play, hello world play. And that's this first block here. YAML works off of indentation, so that basically denotes scope. That's the same thing as curly brackets in JavaScript or JSON. So anything below here is within scope, so there's a play, and then we can have multiple tasks within a play. So one thing that's interesting is there's this task called gathering facts that isn't mentioned here. I have an attribute that I've disabled called gather facts, and I said no. I've commented out so it didn't say no, so it did run it by default. So Ansible is going to run this thing called gather facts by default. And what it does is it goes through and it will dump a lot of information, like what's the platform we're on, how much memory, how many CPUs, all these different things about it. So if that matters when you run your playbook, you sort of have this environment information ready to go. Then we have the hello world task, which I mentioned here, and we're going to use this module called Ansible built-in debug. And all we're going to do is just print out a message. So hello world, there it is. And at the end, Ansible does a little recap, and it says we ran on localhost and we did two tasks just fine. Thank you very much. We're done. That's it. Really simple. So if we do another one, we can do multiple plays in the same playbook. So we have this hello again script. We're going to run one play with one task, and then we're going to do it another play with another task. And this is just to show you how we can build up multiple plays and multiple tasks together. Just like the one before, gathered facts per play and then ran the task. So if you want to know what those Ansible facts look like, let's do that. Okay, look at all that good stuff. See all that JSON output? Those are all of our Ansible facts, all about our Linux box that we're running this thing on. So there it is. So we got IP addresses, we got names, we got serial board information, all kinds of stuff. Loopback interfaces, we got lots of different things in here. So that's what the Ansible Facts does for you when you're trying to manage a workstation. But we can also use it to do things like that's a lot of stuff. I don't care about all that. So let's make that a little easier. And let's do let's just show the IPs of the box instead. So what we're going to do is we're still going to use we're going to use a Ansible built-in debug module, but what we're going to do is we're going to use something called templating with these curly braces. The double curly braces, you may have heard them called mustaches, you may have heard them called handlebars, all these different things. It's all the same, but what we do is this allows us to specify a variable like Ansible Facts, and then we use the dotted notation like you would do with JSON, and it lets us specify all those IPv4 addresses that we saw earlier, and there they are. In fact, you can get IPv6 addresses, and there it is. So that's how you can start to gather facts and use those facts in your configuration. In fact, we can even do it to show files in our file system. So if I did the same thing to show files, right? I can print out my current directory and get the files. I can get the first file and get the last file, all those kinds of things. So all these playbooks I've built for you, and I've got them on the my repository. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to run through some of these real quick. One more you can do that's interesting is we can actually get a web page using another built-in module. So this one is, we're going to get the cisco.com homepage, and we're going to check on some of the details about it. Okay, so rather than dumping the whole page, we just wanted to know that it was successful. We got a 200 status, what the URL was, and when it was last modified. Okay, or if we just wanted the page status, we could get that. This is basically showing you how you can use different debug variables. So where it gets more interesting is that was a web page call. Let's do a REST call. So now what we can do is we can actually enable our ISE REST APIs via Ansible. So I already went in and I manually enabled them. But now what I can do is, if I didn't do that and I had a brand new ISE instance, I brought it for the first time and I wanted to configure it with Ansible, I have API calls that I can use to enable it. So for that, oh, I needed to specify the host name. Let me try this. -I inventory, and then I got to specify the host. I'm in dcloud. There we go. Oh, it still wants my host name in there? Okay. So basically it's complaining because it needs the ISE host name, and I'm just going to add it in real quick. So you can add vars in, and I'm going to add the ISE host name. And as simple as that, I can say I want to go talk to ice.securitydemo.net. Okay, save it, rerun it. There it is. Okay, so I was able to go check and make sure that my OpenAPIs were enabled and make sure that my ERS APIs are enabled. So it confirmed that for me. So that's how you can do quick REST APIs. Now let's get on to some basic playbooks. So let's say I wanted to do network device groups. So I put a lot of stuff in here. I commented a lot of it out because you may want to play with it and try different things, but it's out there. I just want you to know that you can play with it. So what we're going to do now is let's run through some examples for network device groups. So if I just did a quick JSON dump of all my network device groups, here they are. I have some, the default ones defined. And if I wanted to do something a little more interesting, I can also manipulate this data. Okay, we talked about YAML, right? This is JSON with all the curlies and everything. What I can do now is I can do the same thing and export it as YAML. And the reason why this is interesting is because if you have an existing ISE config and you want to convert it into YAML so that you can do Ansible, this is really cool. So I can actually summarize it with a little list. And now check it out. I had this, it went and queried each one for all the details, By default, if you just do a quick a get, it gets all of them, but it only gets the description, the ID, and the name. It doesn't get any other details. So if I want to get more, I do that. But then I can dump it out as YAML. And now I could potentially go take this and I could go build a YAML configuration with it. And I could use it to configure ISE for my entire network, or make sure it was always configured the right way, or make changes in a revision control system, run Ansible, and update ISE that way. So that's pretty cool. What we can also do is create network devices. So let's do that. What we have here is, or create network device groups, I should say. 3.1. So, oh, this one already exists. That's why it's not gonna, it's not happy. There's a bug in the API, so that I'm going to skip this one. Again, we're still in beta. It's still our first release, so we have a bug in the network devices API. But let's do. Can I create a network device? Create network device. There it is. Let's create a WLC, wireless controller. So let's run this one. That's 6.1. So let's clear this and let's create a network device. So what it's going to do is, I've specified some variables up here, because this is really all that you would go put into your ISE configuration. Another one failed. Oh, I need to create the network device group first. Oh, I forgot to do that. Okay, I got to go create my network device group after all. That's why I number these, because they have to go in a certain order. What if I do this one? This is the one I think I want. Yeah. Okay. So I have different versions here. This is a very verbose one where I'm being very verbose and specifying all of the module information and all the configuration information for each and every one of these objects, each of these network device groups. Then I have another example where, rather than do blocks of code for each and every one, it's kind of verbose. I stripped out the stuff that was changing. And so now I just have the name, the description, and the other name for the network device group. And I iterate through that in a loop, and I configure those. Let's see if I can get that to run real quick. And then we'll go back to creating. Yeah, that one worked. Oh, some of it did. It didn't like some of my department stuff, but the other ones worked. That's good. Then the one I really wanted to run is 3.3, because that's where I create the wireless group for my wireless controller. 3.3. Okay, wireless worked. So now I can do 6.1, and that will work as well for my wireless controller. Okay, there it is. So now that I create my network device group, which I'm depending on for my wireless controller, what I did is I created it, and then I dumped out the config. Again, now that I've converted it to YAML, I'm able to go use this. So I could even dump this out of my existing ISE deployment for all my network device groups and make use of it in a YAML config. The other thing you can do, you can also delete network devices. So I've got one here that will go through. I've got a little disclaimer, be careful. It will delete all of your network devices. So if I wanted to do that, I could run delete network devices. And then I think we're just about at time. Yeah, we're at time. So Rigo, let's open it up to questions. Do we have any questions I can start answering about all this?
Yeah, so our panelists have done an amazing job of knocking out mostly all the questions from our panel here, but we do have a few questions. It looks like they have been addressed by our panel, but I think these might be kind of good to maybe kind of bring out to our audience as well, live. First question here is, can you encrypt the password variable in Postman?
Absolutely. Oh, and Postman. Um, I want to say they do the encryption for you. Um, that's why you keep it separate in the environments. But I don't know that one. You'd have to look that up on their site and see. I assume they did. Great
Perfect.
question
Thank you.
though.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for addressing that.
Yeah.
Another question here. Would the Cisco ISE Python SDK be long-term maintained to be up to date with Cisco ISE OpenAPI version?
Absolutely. That's the plan to keep those in sync. Yeah.
Excellent. And let's see, last question, or sorry, next question here that I see. Would ISE be supporting Terraform?
That's our long-term goal. We have a plan to do it. It should be done hopefully by the end of the year, but not done yet.
Thank you so much for addressing that. And the last question that we have from our audience is, what functionality do you aim to introduce with Terraform support, and what areas are going to be available with Terraform?
So that one, that's too deep to know yet. I can't tell you all the details on that. Sorry. We do want to support Terraform. I don't know about Terraform support and what all is involved there, so I can't comment on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Uh,
I did want to go through the DevNet resource, Rigo, that people can go use. Um,
okay.
so real quickly, we're going to be putting out a DevNet Learning Lab that covers these exact things that I just did. Um, if you don't know about developer environments and things like that, they have fantastic videos on YouTube and on DevNet to help you with this. So don't just rely on this video. There's other great ones out there in DevNet. The lab you can use for this is ISE with Ansible automation. This is a DevNet sandbox. It's basically a vanilla sandbox. You can do whatever you want with it, including the things that I just went through. I went over today. And to get to it, you go to devnetsandbox.cisco.com. You click on security to filter on the security sandboxes, and you can choose ISE with Ansible automation. And then it's a real quick process to go click reserve and reserve again. And in about 15 minutes, you are going to be up and running, able to run the things I was just doing. And it's really cool because it actually, you have to VPN in, you have to use AnyConnect to get in there, but it gives you an email with the information, and it actually has a little output panel that tells you the VPN information. So it's really cool. Just take that, go log in and make use of it. So if you want access to a lot of the things I talked about today, here are the URLs. The GitHub address is, that's my GitHub account. It's one HOMAS, so it looks like a T, but it's one HOMAS for Thomas. If you go there, I have the ERS API collections, as well as all of the scripts that I installed and ran today, and more that I didn't have a chance to run, but it's all out there. So with that, I think we're good, Rigo.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Thomas. Very big thank you, for speaking about this topic with our audience. I hope that everyone found great value in the information and resources that were shared here today. I would also like to extend a very big thank you to each and every one of our panelists for lending a hand with all of the questions throughout the webinar. We really appreciate it. And just a quick reminder to our audience that you're going to receive a short pop-up survey as soon as you exit. And we would be so grateful if you can just take a few minutes to complete it and let us know how you like today's presentation. We always look forward to receiving your valuable feedback. And again, for those of you who are interested in revisiting this session, we will have the recording available for on-demand viewing within about 5 business days after today. For your reference, you are going to be receiving an email within about 15 minutes or so that will contain the link to where the recording will be located. But I will also be posting the direct link into the chat window if you'd like to just copy and save it for future reference as well. And last but not least, I do want to let our attendees know that we do have another ISE webinar coming up early next month on August 3rd, and we're going to be covering what's new in ISE 3.1. So if you're interested in learning about the new features in 3.1, we do invite you to join us and register for that webinar. That's actually located on the same ISE training videos page. I'm going to go ahead and repost that link into the chat window there again for reference, so you can check it out and register and hopefully join us for the month of August. Thanks again to our presenter, to our panelists, and to all of our attendees for joining us here live. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.